Hello, this is Janet Michael. In addition to hosting The Valley Today each weekday at noon on the River 95.3, I also produce podcasts. And I'm excited to kick off Season 2 of our podcast series in partnership with Rappahannock Electric Cooperative. It's called We Are REC. Every week we'll release a new episode talking to different people from REC about a host of different topics. We'll get tips for saving money on your electric bill. We'll talk about renewable energy and the impact it can have in our communities. We'll get some behind-the-scenes info about what happens when the power goes out in a storm. Don't miss out on information about community grants, scholarships, REC-hosted events, and more. Get every single episode on our website at theriver953.com under the podcast tab, or you can subscribe for free in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or on Spotify. Just do a quick search for We Are REC. Hello and welcome to The Valley Today. I am your host, Janet Michael. It is The Valley Business Today as you're listening to the show. We, however, have pre-recorded on a Monday afternoon so that we can have our regular monthly conversation with Niki Cales from the Front Royal Warren County Chamber of Commerce. Once again, on the Zoom screen, no live in studio, nothing yet, but we're ever hopeful, aren't we?
Yes, we are. We are ever hopeful that it's going to happen again soon. I don't want us all to get so disconnected. I mean, doing things this way is helpful in some instances. If you have a quick meeting that can happen, you don't have to leave the office and you do all of that sort of stuff. But I certainly don't want us to miss that connection, or get used to not having the connection that we get when we're all able to meet in public.
Although I will say that you and I ran into each other at Target a couple of weeks ago, and I think everybody around us thought we had lost our minds because we were so excited to have accidentally run into each other face to face.
Right. I mean, we talk on a pretty regular basis, but not having seen you in so long. Yeah, it was really nice to get to see you in Target. And as you know, Target's one of the only stores that I'm going to in person right now. So, that's a bigger store. Yeah, it was good to see you.
Let's get all the COVID talk out of the way then in the beginning of the show, because I know you've got a lot of things that you want to make sure that everybody understands and knows about from a pandemic perspective. So let's start with the town grants, because they were offering the grants. The chamber is administering them. It closed, but now it's reopened again.
Yes. So we reopened last week for another 2-week round to utilize the rest of the money that we had available. We could potentially run out of money. So as we're talking, I want people to still apply, of course, and apply quickly. So by the time folks hear this, there will be a couple of days left in this round. So you'll have to apply by Friday. And you can do that at frontroyalva.com/cares. And you can actually, if you just go to the town's website, frontroyalva.com, there's a huge button on the front page that says CARES on it. And you just click that button. And then at the very top of the screen, it says apply here.
Did they get more money to open this back up a second time, or did they just not give away all of the money they had the first go round?
So there was some money left over from the first round, which is what we're utilizing currently. But there is a second round of funding. Now, I can't say, that this particular application process will open up again. Now, there is a possibility it will. There is a possibility they'll choose to utilize some more money towards this sort of funding, but they may decide to allocate it elsewhere. So that second round of money exists, and they're working out the details right now on how they're going to handle that. But I'm sure they're going to do some really good stuff with that as well.
I'm really surprised that there was any money left over after the first round. Are businesses not applying? Do they not understand or realize what a benefit this could be?
Well, so we've had about 110 businesses that have taken advantage of the grants, which is terrific. But I think for some folks, we talked a little bit about it before we went on air. I think for some folks, the idea of having to disclose any sort of financial information can be scary. And so, one of the things that I want to make sure people understand is, number one, it is absolutely confidential. So this information isn't going anywhere but to the reviewers. And it's not a ton of information that you need to provide. For most people, providing a P&L March through May of 2019 and a P&L March through May of 2020 to demonstrate that 20% reduction is plenty. And that's relatively easy to pull yourself or to have your accountant pull for you. And 9 times out of 10, if you submit that information, that's enough.
How much can you get? I mean, is there a minimum or a maximum? Can I get like 50 or 60 grand? Because I want to buy an island and move away somewhere.
I think we're all thinking things like that. So yes, there is there are set guidelines for the amount of money that you can receive. So dependent on what your 2019 gross receipts are. So keep in mind that we're talking about what you reported to the town. So if you reported 29,000, let's just say, to the town of Front Royal for 2019, but in fact, your gross receipts were, let's say they were 54,000. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you reach out to the town. You want to make sure you correct that and pay the difference. And, it's not a huge difference. Typically, we're talking about pennies on the dollar to ensure that you are in the right category. Say you're between $15,000 and $50,000. You're in the $2,500 category. If you are $500,000 to $2 million, you're in the $20,000 category. So then there's four categories. It's $2,500, $5,000, $10,000, and $20,000.
Now, what if you didn't have a business March through May of last year and you started it in August of last year? Are you not eligible?
The vast majority of businesses, because there's not a history, you're probably not going to get funding from this round of grant money just because there's no history that we can pull from. However, there are other programs and other opportunities that they're looking at potentially utilizing some money for that too. So keep an eye out for that, because there could be something that comes available for folks who don't necessarily fit this model.
And these are kind of the town rules. They didn't get to pick some of these rules either. I mean, because this is money from the federal government, they've got to work within certain parameters in how they give it out anyway, right?
That is 100% accurate. So so the CARES Act spells out a lot of how this money needs to be used. It spells out exactly how this money needs to be utilized. And so they have to stick within those parameters and make sure that they're doing everything 100% accurate, or of course they have to pay the money back.
And people have till Friday. Businesses have till Friday to go to the town's website and do their application.
Absolutely. They have until Friday to do that. And again, I absolutely encourage you to do that. If folks are confused about what they need to submit, or if they have questions, just in general, I encourage you to call the chamber office, 540-635-3185. Right now I have Katie from the town finance office, who I cannot stress enough how awesome Katie is. So let me give Katie a huge shout out and say thank you for working with me during this project, and thanks to the town for supplying, some additional help. Katie or myself will answer the phone and let you, be happy to talk to you about the process, how it works, and how it can work for you. And maybe dissuade if you have, some nervousness about that financial stuff or whatever. We certainly want to talk to you about that and explain to you how the process works to make it to ease your mind a little bit. But if you saw a 20% reduction, or if your business was forced to close by the governor's order and you haven't applied for a grant yet and you're in the town limits, do so. So one of the other things, Janet, just real quick, I know folks, who've gotten PPP funds, maybe they've gotten EIDL loan funds, and they're thinking maybe this isn't for them. This is for those folks too, because we don't know how long we're going to be in this. We can all be really hopeful that it's going to be over, tomorrow. But we don't know that that's the case. So we need to be preparing and planning. We're going into winter and we're going into first quarter, which we know historically for most folks, most business owners, they can be difficult times.
So what kind of turnaround are we looking at? If I go to the town's website today and make my application, how long does it take to process that and get a check back in my hands?
So I would say the average is about 5 to 7 days from the time you apply to the time that we have a check ready for you. Now, that being said, there are businesses that we have to do a little more research on, we have to look at a little deeper to make sure that they qualify for, those things that we talked about. So it can take as much as 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, but for the vast majority of people, you see that check within about 7 days.
Now, is the county doing the same kind of grants? Have they announced what they're doing with their CARES funding yet?
So we are actually working with the county right now to develop that program. And, we're hoping to see that come online, really soon. It'll look very similar to the town's program. And so folks should definitely be watching for that to happen. And the county program, it looks like, is going to have a nonprofit component to it as well. So, there's going to be opportunities for nonprofits as well as businesses, just like with the town program.
Can we talk for a second about, and I joked with you before we started recording, I was going to call this part the virus in the workplace, but there have been some new rules or new laws that went into effect last week on businesses and employers having a COVID-19 plan.
These are actually, regulations that went into effect in July 28th. And so what they said is they were going to start enforcing them on August 28th.
These are basically rules and guidelines for how employers should treat their employees and have a plan for their workforce if somebody tests positive, what their risk assessment levels are. It's not anything really in depth, especially for a lot of small businesses. They just need to know if employee A gets it and is in contact with employee B, C, and D, what happens and what do you do and what's protocol?
Yes, exactly. And, having a plan is important for all of us. I think we should always have a plan. And if we're really good, we have that plan, written down and communicated. And there are some things in there about, temperature checks and, those sorts of things that I think are, can be a little overwhelming for folks. But reading, just making sure that you're adhering to those guidelines, is really important. You can go back to Friday the 28th on the Chamber's Facebook, and I shared a link to all of the guidelines. So you can, take a look at that just to make sure that, I bet a vast majority of the businesses are already adhering to them and don't even realize that they are.
Yeah.
So you can go back and look at them and, make sure that you are. And of course, if there's anything on that list that is confusing, or if you need help figuring out how you can make that happen, we're always here to help folks do that. I know the Small Business Development Center in Middletown is more than happy to help folks with that. So, just reach out, to the resources that you have available to help, to help you make heads or tails out of those sorts of things.
And I'll put links to all of that in the show notes
Awesome.
So that people can go there and get it. So let's take a quick break. I have one more COVID question, but I'll save it for the next segment, and then we can talk chamber stuff.
Woo! I look forward to it.
Not that all this isn't chamber stuff, because this is kind of the kind of stuff that you provide to members and the business community as a whole.
Right.
So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Niki Cales from the Front Royal Warren County Chamber of Commerce. It is the Valley Business Today. Again, you're hearing it on a Wednesday. We, however, have pre-recorded it on a Monday afternoon, but it's still going to be the same couple of minutes until we come back.
Do you know anyone who is struggling with financial hardships because of coronavirus? Our new webinar called Coping with the Money Crunch can help. We'll talk about immediate options to consider, revising or creating a spending plan, and lots of community resources. Then we'll cover how to narrow your priorities, contact creditors, and avoid scams and risky loans. The webinar is free, and you can either join by phone or through Zoom on a smartphone, tablet, or computer. You can find out more by visiting the Northern Shenandoah Valley Financial Education Program on Facebook or calling Karen Poff at 540-635-4549. Let me show you how to make your own plan or help someone you care about get through the crisis. Call 635-4549 or visit at NSV Financial Education on Facebook today.
Welcome back to the Valley Today. I am your host, Janet Michael. It is the Valley Business Today. As you're listening to the show on a Wednesday afternoon, we, however, have pre-recorded our conversation with Niki Cales from the Front Royal Warren County Chamber of Commerce over Zoom on a Monday, rainy Monday afternoon, no less. So, Niki, in the first segment, we talked about a lot of COVID-19 stuff. We talked about the town grants, the potential for county grants coming down the pike. We talked about the workplace rules that are now being enforced that actually went into effect back in July. I have one more COVID question for you, and I want to make sure people understand that the reason that you know all of this stuff is not just because you're the Chamber of Commerce, but you're kind of like the resource for businesses in the community, whether they are members members of the chamber or not. You kind of have to know all of this
Sure.
to be able to answer questions no matter who calls to ask.
Of course. And I'm really fortunate, that we have members and folks who volunteer their time with the chamber to ensure that I know these things and that, we can talk confidently about things like this and make sure that we're sharing the proper information. Well, and not even so much that, but point people in the right direction to get the proper information.
So the last question I have for you that's directly COVID related, because I know everything that we talk about, everything that I talk about with everybody is somehow or another COVID-19 related. The payroll tax relief. There are some things that people need to know and understand when that goes into effect with, I think, the latest executive order. When does that start?
So it goes into effect September 1st. And, it means for employers that, they really have to pay attention. It is an opt-in or opt-out sort of thing, with the payroll taxes. So, I don't want to give any advice, but so what I want to say to folks is that you really want to have a discussion with your accountant, or someone who does your financials, to determine exactly how you need to be handling this particular issue. And once you have all the information, you're going to want to have a discussion with your employees about exactly what the right thing to do is. And if, again, like we talked about a little earlier, if you don't necessarily have somebody that you can talk to about that, call the chamber office and we'll help either answer the questions that you have, help you work through it, or we'll ensure that we connect you with the right person who can give you exactly the answers you need. There are after effects of things like, this particular executive order that you really have to be cognizant about. And you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing. So at the end of the day, you're not finding yourself paying back things that, maybe you shouldn't have had to, that sort of stuff. So I, encourage everybody, to look at the language really carefully and to make sure that you're reaching out to the person who's doing your financials, your accountant, to help you understand exactly how you need to be adhering to this order.
And I think it's really important too, you mentioned, it is opt-in. So it's not a requirement if employers decide that they're not even, maybe they're going to take advantage of it later, but not on September 1st.
Well, and I think that's where having open communication with your employees comes in, because I think everybody understanding exactly what it means and exactly what kind of money you're talking about, all of those sorts of things. I think an open, honest line of communication with your employees is probably the best thing you can do at this point with this particular issue, to make sure that the employees understand how much money you're talking about in or out of their paycheck, those sorts of things.
So speaking of planning, you have planned, unplanned, replanned, and then planned again. Let's start with the wine and craft, because sadly there will be no wine and craft festival in 2020, right?
There will be no wine and craft festival, and there will be no river and brews festival. With the current governor's order of 1,000 people at an outdoor event, it is just next to impossible for us to adhere to those guidelines. Not just that, but you also look at, there are additional guidelines with tastings and, those sorts of things, all the things that make those events really special. If we had to hold the Wine and Craft Festival to 1,000 people, you're talking about a tenth of the number of people that normally attend that event. And it just,
Well, you're a quarter of the way there just with the staffing that has to happen from the vendors and the wineries and everything else. So when you say 1,000 people, that's not even attendees. You're only probably going to be able to let 700 people in based on the number of people that have to be there to work.
That is a terrific point. And, as somebody who was the chairman of that event for years and years, you would know that, because that event, both of the events happen downtown, policing the number of people is next to impossible too, because, with side streets and, you've got folks who are coming downtown to go shopping and, we want all of that to happen. So it was just, it was very difficult. It was a really hard decision. It was a really sad decision. We waited as long as we could to make the decision, but inevitably what I knew was going to happen actually had to happen, and we did have to cancel. Now, what I want to say is the vendors and the advanced ticket holders, have been terrific. A lot of people, of course, were disappointed, as we were, but over half of our vendors, which this number has shocked me, over half of our vendors said, you know what, no, keep our money, do not refund our money, we will be there next year. I think that is a statement about the Wine and Craft Festival.
Oh yeah.
And what people think of that event, and that they want to be there. So we're excited about that. We're very, very hopeful for 2021. May 15th, 2021. We're hopeful to be able to have the event and to have it be the beautiful, wonderful, bring everybody together event that it usually is.
On a more upbeat note, though, you are still working on potentially having the annual dinner, because it's a little bit more controllable from an attendance perspective.
It is. So we're working on having the annual dinner at the end of the month, September 26th, at Shenandoah Valley Golf Club. Now, of course, it will look different than it's looked in previous years. The event will be outside on the patio, but it's a beautiful venue, with hanging lights, and it's going to be really fun. And it'll be a little more low key than it is normally. We'll have some of the same elements as far as awards and some of the auction items and that sort of stuff. And of course, we'll adhere to CDC guidelines. We'll do all of the things that we have to do to make it appropriate for an event in the time of Corona. But we're looking forward to getting together with our local business owners and individuals and celebrating what makes our community wonderful. And so we're gonna have that event. We'll have the ticket information available within the next few days, and we hope people will consider coming out and joining us for an evening again of just celebrating all that's wonderful in Front Royal and Warren County.
I love the idea that it's outside. I mean, just
fun.
Being outside gives it a whole new twist, and it's going to make it a whole lot easier to decorate. I remember also having been chair of that particular committee several times. I remember what a nightmare it was with themes and decorations, but outside, Mother Nature has decorated for you.
Well, and you're right. And based on, I'm sure other people see it too, based on just the changes that I've seen already in the landscape and the leaves, and we could potentially have some color by then. I mean, things are definitely, you can feel it in the air. You can feel autumn rolling in. It's definitely coming in maybe a little early, and maybe autumn feels the same way we do about 2020 and just wants to get it over with.
It just wants to be done. Let's just start steamrolling through these seasons and be finished with it. So the one last thing I want to ask you about is Candidates Forum, because I know you're planning to have it, but it too is going to look a little different this year.
Yes, it is. So we're working right now with the school system to determine the potential for using one of the schools for the Candidates Forum. Obviously, again, because we're always talking about COVID, like you said earlier, there are a lot of guidelines that we're going to have to adhere to. There's a lot of things that are going to have to happen. So exactly what crowd size and whether or not we have spectators is going to look like, I don't know. What I can tell you right now is, so the week of September 13th through the 20th, we will be soliciting questions from the public to be asked at the forum. So we're asking everybody to send their questions to the chamber. You can send them through the mail if you want to. You can walk them into the office. You can email them. You can send them to us via Facebook. However you want to get those questions to us. Now, the thing to remind everybody is these are issue-based questions. So we want you to ensure that you are asking questions that are based on issues that are relevant to the governance of Front Royal and Warren County, and that they are not personal attacks. We're not going to ask a question to one candidate that we can't ask to everybody. So those are the things to remember, but we absolutely encourage you to submit questions and help us make this event the event that helps you decide who you're going to cast your vote for in November.
And the Candidates Forum is a great educational resource for you to use to help you make those decisions.
Sure. I think that's one of the things that is most important, is that you educate yourself. And it's hard right now because, with the advent of social media and those sorts of things, there's so much out there that's not true that I think it's really hard for folks to wade through what is and isn't true. But I think we absolutely have an obligation to do that. We have an obligation to do the research and to make sure that we are voting for the candidates that most align with our beliefs and how we feel things should be done. And we hear all about national politics, but local government is the thing that affects you the most. It affects the roads you drive on. It affects the businesses that you shop in. It affects everybody. So you want to make sure that you are making the absolute best decisions for yourself when you're casting those votes.
And you're thinking October is when you're going to have the candidates
We're
forum?
thinking the very latest part of September or the first week in October will be when we have it, because we want to make sure that we offer enough opportunity for everybody to see the forum who's able to see it. You know, we'll have streaming versions of it. We'll have, you know, videos. We'll have links that you can go and click and watch the video, those sorts of things. So we'll have all of that available to everyone. But we just want to, you know, we want to make sure that we provide you an opportunity to be as educated as humanly possible about the issues.
And this November is just a town election.
This year it is just town council. So you've got the mayor race, which there are 3 candidates for the mayor race, and you have a town council race. So there are 8 candidates for 3 seats on town council.
Wow. Everybody wants to be on town council. Everybody wants to be mayor.
Right?
I'm pretty sure that would disqualify anybody I would want to vote for, because why would you want to be in any of those positions right now?
Yeah.
Or ever.
Right. It's a hard thing. You know, I commend people who decide to run for office, and really, especially when you decide to run for your local offices, because, you know, you live here and, you know, you're accessible. You know, because you're shopping and, you know, in your local stores and, you know, those sorts of things. And quite honestly, it doesn't pay a lot of money for a lot of work. So, you know, for folks who take the time to run for office and serve in public office, thank you, because, you know, it's a difficult thing.
So tell me again, where can people go get more information about town grants?
Okay, they can go to the town's website, frontroyalva.com. And then on the very front of the page, there's a large button for the CARES grant.
And what's the Chamber's website for information about Chamber events?
frontroyalchamber.com.
And then Facebook is where you try to keep everything up to date when anything changes or gets added to things. How do they find you on Facebook?
Facebook.com/frontroyalchamber.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for taking some time to meet me on the Zoom screen today, even though it's not in the studio or even we should do a show in the parking lot jargon. Maybe that's what we'll do next month.
Okay, I'm down. Let's do it.
We're going to wrap our conversation up today with Niki Cales. She is the president of the Front Royal Warren County Chamber of Commerce. It is the Valley Business Today. As you're listening to the show on a Wednesday afternoon, we, of course, have pre-recorded it on a Monday afternoon instead. I will be back tomorrow with a brand new episode of the Valley Today. We're going to have a conversation with Dr. Bishop, who is the superintendent at Clark County Public Schools. He's going to fill us in on what schools are going to look like when they reopen next week. So meet me back here tomorrow, just a few minutes after noon.